Her blind date took one look at her scars and walked out. Every wolf in the restaurant watched her humiliation. But when the Alpha King walked through that door and saw those same scars, he didn't run. He knelt and claimed her as his queen in front of everyone. This is the story of how one rejection became a coronation. Let's go back to 5 minutes before everything changed. Seraphine sat alone at the corner table, tears cutting tracks down her face. The waiter wouldn't meet her eyes. The couple 3 tables over whispered behind their menus. She could hear every word. Rogue attack survivor. Face ruined. No wolf would want her now. She'd believed tonight would be different. Her friend had sworn this blind date was kind, open-minded. But the moment he saw the claw marks carved from her temple to her jaw, he muttered an excuse about a work emergency and disappeared through the exit. The worst part wasn't the rejection. It was the silence that followed. 40 wolves in that restaurant, and not one defended her. Not one said his name aloud in shame. She reached for her coat. That's when the front door opened again. And Caliph, Alpha King of the Northern Territories, stepped inside, his eyes locked on her before he'd even cleared the threshold. Seraphine had worn her hair up that night. That was the first mistake. Her cousin Brielle had convinced her it was time. Time to stop hiding. Time to let someone see her. Time to believe that maybe, just maybe, a wolf existed who could look past what the Bloodfire had left behind. So she sat at a corner table in the Borderlands Tavern, hands folded in her lap, silver-red scars carved from her temple down the curve of her neck, fully visible. Exposed. The mark of a curse she didn't ask for and couldn't undo. She told herself this was courage. When Corvin walked through the door, she recognized him immediately from the photo Brielle had shown her. Tall. Sharp jaw. Confident stride. The kind of wolf who turned heads without trying. She stood. Smiled. Tried to ignore the way her stomach twisted into knots. He crossed the room toward her table. His eyes swept over her face and stopped. His expression shifted. Subtle at first. Then unmistakable. Disgust. He didn't sit down. You didn't tell me you were marked. Seraphine opened her mouth, but no sound came out. Her throat had closed. I don't date cursed wolves. You should have been honest. The words hit like claws. I'm not wasting my time on damaged goods. He turned. Walked back toward the exit. Didn't look back once. The restaurant had gone completely silent. 40 wolves. 40 witnesses. Every single one of them staring. Seraphine sank back into her chair, hands trembling. She could hear the whispers starting. Low at first. Then louder. Bloodfire scars. Poor thing thought someone would actually want her. Cursed wolves shouldn't be allowed in public. Her vision blurred. Tears spilled down her cheeks before she could stop them. She wanted to run. Wanted to vanish. But her legs wouldn't move. Her body had locked in place, frozen under the weight of their judgment. This was a mistake. She should have stayed invisible. Should have known better than to believe anyone could see past the curse etched into her skin. The waiter approached, awkward and hesitant. Still dining tonight, miss? She couldn't answer. Couldn't even look at him. Her chest felt too tight. Breathing hurt. She reached for her coat with shaking hands. That's when the door opened again. Every head in the restaurant turned. Caliph stepped inside. The Alpha King of the Northern Territories didn't announce himself. Didn't need to. His presence alone silenced the room in a way fear couldn't. Respect. Power. Authority that didn't demand, it simply was. He wore no crown. No ceremonial robes. Just dark travel leathers and boots, still dusty from the road. But every wolf in that room recognized him instantly. And he wasn't looking at them. His eyes locked on Seraphine before he'd even cleared the threshold. She froze. He moved toward her table. Not slowly. Not cautiously. With purpose. The whispers had stopped completely now. The entire restaurant held its breath. Caliph stopped in front of her. His gaze dropped to the scars on her face and neck. She waited for it. The same disgust. The same rejection. The same confirmation that she was unworthy. But he didn't flinch. He didn't turn away. Instead, he knelt. One knee to the ground. Right there in front of everyone. Seraphine's heart stopped. You've been waiting, he said. His voice was low, steady, meant only for her, though every wolf in the room could hear him. I'm sorry I'm late. She stared at him, unable to process what was happening. He reached for her hand. She didn't pull away. Couldn't. Your scars aren't a curse. They're proof you survived something that would have killed a weaker wolf. Tears fell harder now. But not from shame. I came here tonight because I heard a rumor that a wolf marked by bloodfire was finally brave enough to be seen. I wanted to meet her, to see if the rumors were true. He stood, still holding her hand. They are. His voice carried now, filling the space. Addressing the room. Addressing the pack. Seraphine of the Eastern Ridge is mine. My queen. My chosen mate. And if any wolf in this territory questions her worth again, they'll answer to me. The restaurant erupted. Not in whispers. In submission. Every wolf dropped their gaze, bowed their heads, bent their knees. Every single one. Except Seraphine, who stared at the Alpha King holding her hand and realized her life had just changed forever. Drop a wolf emoji if you've ever been rejected for something you can't control. Hit subscribe because what walks through that door next? About to change everything. The temperature in the Borderlands tavern dropped so suddenly that frost formed on the rim of wine glasses. Every wolf in the restaurant felt it before they saw him. That primal shift in the air when an apex predator enters a room full of prey. Conversations died mid-sentence. Forks clattered against plates. Wolves who had been laughing moments ago now sat rigid in their seats, instincts screaming at them to lower their eyes, bow their heads, submit. No one had announced him. No one had to. Caliph Varen stepped through the doorway and the world rearranged itself around his presence. Towering, broad-shouldered, dark armor that looked like it had been forged in shadow and tempered in blood. His eyes swept the room with the kind of intensity that made grown wolves flinch. This was the Alpha King of the Iron Vale Kingdom, the most powerful alpha in the north. A wolf whose name was whispered in fear and reverence across 6 territories. And he wasn't supposed to be here. The Iron Vale was 3 territories away. He had no business in the Borderlands. No reason to walk into a tavern full of common wolves on a quiet night. Except he did. He had been hunting for 18 years. Searching. Following rumors and whispers and half-truths that led nowhere. Chasing a ghost he refused to believe was dead. His commanders thought he was obsessed. His council thought he was broken. But Caliph knew. Somewhere out there, she had survived. His eyes moved past frozen wolves clutching their drinks. Past plates of food growing cold. Past the bartender who had stopped mid-pour and now stood with a bottle hovering uselessly in the air. Then he saw her. Sitting by the window. Alone. Tears streaking down her face. Silver-red scars catching the flicker of candlelight. Caliph went completely still. Those scars. He knew those scars. His wolf, silent and dormant for 18 years, suddenly roared to life inside his chest. Mate. Found her. Alive. Ours. The word slammed through him with the force of avalanche. His heart, which had beaten steady and cold for nearly 2 decades, lurched violently. His hands clenched into fists at his sides. Every instinct in his body screamed at him to close the distance. To reach her. To confirm what his wolf already knew beyond any shadow of doubt. But he forced himself to breathe. To think. To move with control instead of desperation. Because if he was wrong, if this was another false lead, another cruel trick of fate, it would destroy him. But those scars. No other wolf bore marks like that. The blood fire didn't scar randomly. It marked with purpose. With recognition. With royal blood. Caliph moved. For strides. That's all it took to cross the restaurant and close the distance between them. Seraphine looked up. Her eyes were red from crying. Confused. Terrified. She didn't recognize him. Of course she didn't. She had been 5 years old the last time they were in the same room. The last time the mate bond had brushed against her infant wolf and marked her as his. The night her family was slaughtered and she disappeared into smoke and flame. What is your name? His voice came out rougher than he intended. A command. But his eyes were desperate. Pleading. Begging her to say the name he needed to hear. She hesitated. looked around the restaurant as if searching for an escape. Her hands were shaking. Seraphine. The sound of it hit him like a fist to the chest. But he needed more. Needed to be sure. Your family name. She swallowed hard. Looked down at her lap. Ashenmore. The restaurant exploded. Gasps tore through the silence. Glass shattered as someone dropped their drink. Wolves shot to their feet, chairs scraping violently against the floor. Ashenmore? That bloodline was exterminated. Those scars, those are royal bloodfire scars. Impossible. The Ashenmore line died 18 years ago. Seraphine flinched at the noise, at the chaos erupting around her. She had no idea what was happening. No idea why her family name, a name she barely remembered, was causing wolves to panic. Caliph ignored them. All of them. His focus was locked entirely on her. Your scars. How did you get them? She looked up at him, confusion written all over her face. A fire when I was 5. My parents died. I don't remember much. His chest tightened. Of course she didn't remember. She had been a child. Traumatized. Alone. You don't remember. His voice was softer now. Gentler. But I do. He reached out slowly, carefully, as if approaching something fragile and wild. May I touch them? Seraphine stared at him. This massive, terrifying alpha who had just walked into her worst night and turned it into something she couldn't comprehend. Something in his eyes made her pause. Made her see past the armor and the power and the command. She saw desperation. Longing. Hope. Yes. The word left her lips as barely more than a whisper. Calith's fingers brushed against the scars on her temple. The moment his skin made contact, everything exploded. The mate bond, severed and buried 18 years ago, snapped back into place with the force of a lightning strike. Seraphine gasped, her entire body jerking as if she'd been struck. Her silent wolf, dormant and voiceless for as long as she could remember, suddenly howled. Not in pain. In recognition. In joy. In relief. Her scars flared bright silver, glowing like molten starlight. Calith's eyes flashed pure gold, his wolf surging forward and roaring in triumph. Power rippled outward from them in waves, rattling every window in the tavern, shaking the walls, forcing every wolf in the room to their knees. Both of them felt it. The bond. Undeniable. Overwhelming. Ancient and absolute. You are Seraphine Ashenmore. Calith's voice was steady now, reverent, as he cupped her face like she was the most precious thing in existence. Daughter of General Theron Ashenmore. Royal bloodline of the Iron Veil. He leaned closer, his forehead nearly touching hers. And you are my fated mate. Calith did the unthinkable. The Alpha King, ruler of the most powerful kingdom in the north, dropped to one knee before her. The entire restaurant went silent. Wolves who had been bowing their heads now stared in shock. An Alpha King didn't kneel. Not for anyone. Not ever. But Calith knelt in front of Seraphine as if she were the only thing in the world that mattered. His hand still held hers, and his eyes never left her face as he spoke. Seraphine Ashenmore, I claim you as my fated mate. As my queen. As the rightful heir to the throne stolen from your family. His voice carried through the tavern, steady and absolute, a vow spoken before witnesses who would carry this moment across every territory by morning. Seraphine shook her head, tears streaming harder now. I don't understand. I'm nobody. I'm cursed. I've been invisible my entire life. How can I be what you're saying? Her voice cracked on the last word, and she tried to pull her hand away, but he held firm. Gentle, but unshakable. Calith's expression softened, and when he spoke again, his voice was meant only for her, though every wolf in the room could hear. You were never cursed. 18 years ago, my uncle tried to kill you to destroy our mate bond and steal my throne. He burned you with enchanted wolfsbane fire. Those scars should have killed you, Seraphine. No wolf survives blood fire. But you did. You survived because you are stronger than he ever imagined. She stared at him, struggling to process what he was saying. Her entire life, she had been told the scars were a curse. A punishment. A mark of shame that made her unwanted and untouchable. And now this man, this king, was telling her they were proof of her strength? Caliph lifted her hand to his lips and pressed a kiss to her knuckles, reverent and slow. I've searched for you for 18 years. I thought you were dead. My wolf went silent the night you disappeared. I couldn't feel you through the bond anymore, and I believed I'd lost you before I ever had the chance to know you. But you're here. You're alive. And I will never let you go again. Seraphine's wolf was howling inside her chest. Mate. 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 The word echoed through every fiber of her being, louder and stronger than anything she'd ever felt. Her scars glowed brighter, responding to his touch, to his presence, to the bond that had been waiting 18 years to complete itself. Her voice came out small and trembling. I don't know how to be a queen. I don't know how to be anything but invisible. Caliph stood then, pulling her to her feet with him, and cupped her face in both hands. You were never meant to be invisible. You were meant to stand beside me, to rule, to be seen. And I will teach you everything. But first, I need to hear you say it. I need you to accept this bond. Accept me. Seraphine looked into his eyes, those fierce golden eyes that had been searching for her since she was a child. Her wolf was screaming at her to say yes. Her heart was pounding so hard she thought it might break through her ribs. Everything about this moment was overwhelming and terrifying and impossible. But for the first time in her life, someone was looking at her and seeing worth. Seeing strength. Seeing a future. She took a shaky breath. I accept. Yes, I accept. The bond completed. It slammed into place with a force that knocked the breath from her lungs. Power surged through her veins, wild and ancient and overwhelming. Her scars erupted in brilliant silver light. Calith's eyes flashed pure gold, and the air around them crackled with energy. The bond wrapped around them both, tying their souls together in a way that could never be undone. She could feel him now. Feel his wolf. Feel his emotions. Feel the relief and joy and fierce possessiveness radiating from him in waves. And then, as if choreographed, every single wolf in the restaurant dropped to their knees. Not just a bow. Full submission. Foreheads to the ground. And when they spoke, their voices rang out in unison. Your Majesty. But they weren't speaking to Caliph. They were speaking to her. Seraphine stood frozen, staring at the sea of wolves bowing before her. 5 minutes ago, she had been invisible. Rejected. Humiliated. A cursed wolf that no one wanted to look at. And now she was a queen. Comment my queen if you got chills. Like this video and tell me, what country are you watching from? Let's build this pack worldwide. Caliph didn't let her go back to Crescent Hollow. He didn't let her return to the small archive room where she'd been living in silence and solitude for years. He took her hand, led her out of the Borderlands tavern, and brought her to his horse waiting outside. He wrapped her in his cloak, the heavy fabric still warm from his body, and lifted her into the saddle before swinging up behind her. His arm came around her waist, holding her securely against his chest, and they rode through the night toward the nearest Iron Vale outpost. The rhythm of the horse's hooves and the warmth of Calith's presence should have been soothing, but Seraphine's mind was racing. Everything had changed in the span of minutes, and she was struggling to catch up. She leaned back against him slightly, and his arm tightened around her in response. Why did your uncle try to kill me? Her voice was quiet, almost lost in the sound of the wind and the horse's movement. Caliph was silent for a moment, and when he spoke, his voice was low and edged with old anger. Because our mate bond appeared when you were born. It's rare, Seraphine. Most wolves don't feel the bond until they're older, until they meet. But ours was immediate. The moon goddess marked us for each other from the beginning. My uncle saw it as a threat. A bond that strong would make me impossible to control, impossible to manipulate. So he decided to destroy it. If he killed you, he thought I'd be weakened enough for him to seize the throne. Seraphine absorbed that, her fingers curling into the fabric of his cloak. You've been searching for me this whole time? For 18 years? Every single day. His voice was steady, but she could feel the emotion behind it through the bond. Every rumor. Every whisper. Every report of a scarred wolf. I followed them all. My commanders thought I was obsessed. My council thought I was chasing ghosts. But I knew you were alive. Seraphine's throat tightened. I've been living in an archive. Alone. Working in silence. I thought I was cursed. I thought no one would ever want me. Caliph pulled her closer, his lips brushing against her hair. Never again. You're coming home. To the throne that should have been yours from the beginning. To the mate who's been waiting for you since the day you were born. And anyone who ever made you feel invisible or unwanted will answer to me. They arrived at the Iron Vale Castle just before dawn. Seraphine had seen castles before from a distance, sketched in old books in the archive. But nothing had prepared her for this. The fortress rose from the mountainside like it had been carved from the stone itself, ancient and massive and radiating power. Towers stretched toward the sky, their peaks disappearing into low-hanging clouds. Walls thick enough to withstand sieges. Gates forged from iron that looked like they'd never been breached. This was the seat of the Alpha King, the heart of the most powerful kingdom in the north. And Caliph was telling her it was now her home. The gates opened as they approached, guards snapping to attention on either side. Their eyes flicked to Seraphine briefly before returning forward, disciplined and controlled. Caliph dismounted first, then reached up and lifted her down from the saddle. His hands lingered at her waist for a moment longer than necessary, steadying her, grounding her. He turned to face the assembled guards, his voice carrying with absolute authority. This is Queen Seraphine Ashenmore. My mate. Anyone who disrespects her answers to me. The guards dropped to one knee in unison, fists over their hearts. Your Majesty. Seraphine's breath caught. It was happening again. People bowing to her, calling her queen. And she still didn't know how to stand under the weight of it. Caliph kept his hand on the small of her back as they walked through the courtyard. Servants stopped mid-task to bow. Soldiers saluted. Nobles who had been crossing the grounds froze and dipped their heads in respect. Seraphine felt their eyes on her. On her scars. She fought the urge to pull the cloak tighter around herself, to hide the marks she'd spent her whole life being ashamed of. But Caliph walked beside her with his head high, his presence daring anyone to question her. They entered the castle through enormous double doors, and Seraphine was immediately overwhelmed by the sheer scale of it. High vaulted ceilings. Tapestries older than most wolves alive. Stone corridors lit by torches and enchanted light that cast everything in a warm, golden glow. It was beautiful. Intimidating. Nothing like the small archive room she'd called home for years. Caliph led her up a winding staircase and down a long hallway, finally stopping in front of a set of carved wooden doors. He pushed them open, and Seraphine stepped inside. The Queen's chambers. The room was enormous. A four-poster bed draped in deep blue fabric. Windows overlooking the mountains. A fireplace large enough to stand in. Shelves lined with books. A wardrobe already filled with gowns she couldn't imagine wearing. Everything was pristine, untouched, like it had been waiting. Calitha's voice was quiet behind her. These chambers have been empty for 18 years. No one has touched them since the night you disappeared. I always believed you'd come home. Seraphine turned to look at him, and the vulnerability in his eyes nearly broke her. He'd been waiting, preparing, hoping, for nearly 2 decades. Before she could respond, there was a knock at the door. Caliph opened it, and a woman stepped inside. Tall, sharp-featured, with dark hair pulled back in a severe braid. She wore the uniform of the Royal Guard, and her movements were precise and controlled. A warrior. Caliph gestured toward her. This is Lyric Nightshade, captain of my personal guard. She'll be responsible for your security. Lyric's eyes swept over Seraphine, assessing but not unkind. So you're the one he's been hunting for. Her gaze lingered on the scars running down Seraphine's temple and neck, and Seraphine instinctively braced herself for the judgment, the disgust, the pity she'd grown used to. But Lyric just tilted her head slightly, something like respect flickering in her expression. Bloodfire marks. You survived Wolfsbane fire as a child? Seraphine hesitated. I think so. I don't remember much. Just the fire. And waking up alone. Lyric's lips curved into the faintest hint of a smile. then you're stronger than half the warriors in this kingdom. Most wolves don't survive bloodfire. The fact that you did, and at 5 years old, means you've got more fight in you than you realize. Seraphine didn't know what to say. No one had ever called her strong before. Cursed, yes. Broken, damaged, unwanted. But never strong. Lyric stepped forward and dipped her head in a formal bow, one fist pressed over her heart. Welcome home, my queen. The words settled over Seraphine like a cloak she wasn't sure she knew how to wear yet. But standing here, in this room that had been waiting for her, with Caliph behind her and Lyric in front of her, she felt something she hadn't felt in 18 years. She felt like maybe, just maybe, she belonged somewhere. Servants began arriving shortly after. They brought trays of food, pitchers of water, fresh linens. They curtsied and called her Your Grace, and asked if there was anything she needed. Seraphine didn't know how to answer. She'd spent so long needing nothing, expecting nothing, that the idea of asking for something felt foreign. One of the servants, a young woman with kind eyes, approached carefully. Your Grace, we've prepared a bath if you'd like. And there are gowns in the wardrobe. We can help you dress for the evening meal if you wish. Seraphine glanced at Caliph, who gave her an encouraging nod. She turned back to the servant. Thank you. That would be helpful. The servants moved efficiently, filling the large copper tub in the adjoining bathing room with steaming water. They laid out towels and oils and a gown of deep emerald green. Seraphine stood in the center of the chaos, feeling completely out of place. Caliph stepped closer, his voice low enough that only she could hear. I know this is overwhelming, but you don't have to do this alone. I'll be here. Every step. She looked up at him, this powerful king who had upended her entire world in a single night. And you really think I can do this? His hand came up to cup her cheek, his thumb brushing gently over one of her scars. I know you can. You've already survived the impossible. This is just the beginning. The next morning, Caliph came to her chambers before the sun had fully risen. Seraphine was already awake, sitting by the window and watching the kingdom spread out below her. She'd barely slept. Every time she closed her eyes, her mind spun with everything that had happened. The restaurant. The mate bond. The castle. The fact that she was apparently a queen now. He knocked softly before entering, and when she turned to look at him, he was dressed differently than the night before. No armor. Just simple training leathers and boots. He looked less like a king and more like a warrior. Come with me. His voice was gentle but left no room for argument. She followed him through the castle and out into the morning air. They walked across the grounds until they reached the training arena, a wide circular space surrounded by stone walls. Other warriors were already there, running drills, sparring, preparing for the day. They stopped when they saw Caliph enter. And when they saw Seraphine behind him, they stared. Caliph ignored them and turned to face her. I want to teach you to fight. Seraphine's stomach dropped. I don't know how to fight. I've never even shifted properly. My wolf has been silent my whole life. I don't think I can do this. Caliph stepped closer, his voice steady and sure. Your wolf has been protecting you by staying dormant. She went quiet because you weren't safe. But now you are. The bond is complete. I'm here. It's time to let her out. Seraphine looked around at the warriors watching them, their expressions ranging from curiosity to skepticism. She felt exposed. Vulnerable. What if her wolf didn't come? What if she tried and failed in front of all these people? Caliph seemed to sense her fear. He reached out and took her hand, grounding her. Trust me. Trust your wolf. She's been waiting for this. Seraphine nodded, her throat too tight to speak. Caliph led her to the center of the training ring, and the warriors stepped back to give them space. She could feel their eyes on her scars, waiting to see if the scarred queen could actually shift or if she was as broken as she looked. Caliph stood in front of her, his hands resting lightly on her shoulders. Close your eyes. Feel your wolf. Don't force it. Just listen. Seraphine closed her eyes and took a slow breath. She reached inward, searching for the presence that had been silent for so long. And for the first time in 18 years, her wolf answered. The voice was strong and clear and filled with joy. Ready. Safe now. Mate is here. Ready to run. Seraphine gasped, tears pricking at her eyes. She's here. She's really here. Caliph smiled, then let her out. Seraphine let go. The shift happened faster than she expected. Her bones realigned, her body reshaped itself, and suddenly she was standing on 4 legs instead of 2. The world looked different. Sharper. More vibrant. She could smell everything. Hear everything. Feel the wind in her fur and the earth beneath her paws. She looked down at herself and froze. Her fur was pure white. Brilliant and clean, like freshly fallen snow. And running along her side and down her leg were silver markings that mirrored the scars on her human form. They glowed faintly, beautiful instead of damaged. The warriors around the training ring gasped. She heard the whispers immediately. White wolf. She's a white wolf. Only royalty. Only the moon goddess marks wolves in white. Caliph shifted beside her. His wolf was massive, easily twice the size of a normal alpha. Black as midnight with eyes that burned gold. He was terrifying and magnificent, a predator in every sense of the word. But when he looked at her, his wolf's gaze softened. He moved closer, nudging her gently with his muzzle, and the bond between them flared bright and warm. Then he turned and ran. Seraphine didn't think. She just followed. They tore across the training grounds and out into the open fields beyond the castle. The wind whipped through her fur, and her paws ate up the ground beneath her. She was fast. Faster than she'd ever imagined. Her wolf moved with a grace and power that felt natural, instinctive, like she'd been born to do this. Caliph ran beside her, matching her pace, guiding her deeper into the forest. They leapt over fallen logs and streaked between trees. He led her to a stream, and they hunted together, working in tandem to corner a deer. Her wolf knew what to do without being taught. Knew how to move, how to strike, how to work with her mate. When the hunt was done, they stood side by side at the edge of the stream, panting and exhilarated. Seraphine's wolf was singing with joy. She'd never felt so alive. So free. So powerful. Caliph shifted back first, his human form emerging as he stood by the water. Seraphine followed, the shift back feeling just as natural as the first. When she stood on 2 legs again, she was breathless and smiling wider than she could remember. Caliph was looking at her like she was the most incredible thing he'd ever seen. His eyes were full of awe and pride and something deeper that made her heart race. You're magnificent. His voice was rough with emotion. He stepped closer and reached out to tuck a strand of her hair behind her ear. A white wolf. Do you understand what that means? The moon goddess herself marked you. You're not cursed, Seraphine. You're blessed. You always have been. Seraphine felt tears slip down her cheeks, but for the first time, they weren't tears of shame or pain. They were tears of relief. Of joy. Of finally understanding that everything she'd been told about herself was a lie. She wasn't broken. She wasn't cursed. She wasn't invisible. She was a white wolf. A queen. A mate to an alpha king. And she was finally home. White wolf or black wolf? Comment which one you'd be. And like if you're loving Seraphine's transformation. That evening, after training had ended and the sun had begun to set behind the mountains, Caliph invited Seraphine to his private chambers for dinner. She'd returned to the queen's chambers to wash and change, and now stood outside his door feeling nervous for reasons she couldn't quite name. This was her mate. The bond hummed between them constantly now, warm and reassuring. But everything was happening so fast, and she was still trying to catch her breath. She knocked softly, and his voice called for her to enter. His chambers were larger than hers, decorated in dark woods and deep blues. A fire crackled in the hearth. A table had been set near the windows with food and wine. Maps and documents were scattered across a desk in the corner, evidence of the work he'd been doing before she arrived. Caliph stood when she entered, and the way he looked at her made her heart skip. Like she was the only thing in the room that mattered. Like she was everything. They ate together, talking about small things at first. The castle. The pack. Her training. But the conversation felt like a dance around something larger, something neither of them was quite ready to name yet. Finally, Seraphine set down her wine and looked at him. This is all happening so fast. Her voice was quiet, but honest. Yesterday I was invisible. Today I'm a queen. I don't know how to keep up. Caliph moved from his seat and came to kneel beside her chair, his hand covering hers. We can go as slow as you need. I've waited 18 years. I can wait as long as it takes for you to feel ready. Seraphine shook her head, frustrated with herself. It's not that I don't want this. I do. But everyone keeps calling me queen, and I don't feel like one. I don't know how to be what they expect. Caliph stood and gently pulled her to her feet, his hands settling on her waist. Then let me show you what I see. He reached up and tilted her face toward his thumb tracing the line of her scars with such tenderness it made her chest ache. I see strength. I see survival. I see a wolf who endured 18 years of loneliness and pain and still came out the other side with kindness in her heart. I see power you haven't even begun to tap into yet. And I see the most beautiful woman I've ever laid eyes on. Seraphine's breath caught. The scars don't disgust you? Her voice was barely a whisper, the question she'd been too afraid to ask until now. Caliph leaned down and kissed her scarred cheek, slow and reverent. Then her temple. Then her jaw. They're the reason I found you. They're proof you survived something that should have killed you. They're the most beautiful thing I've ever seen. Seraphine's hands came up to grip his shoulders, torn between pulling him closer and feeling overwhelmed by the intensity of everything she was feeling. The mate bond flared between them, hot and insistent, pulling them together like gravity. Calitha's voice dropped to a low growl, his forehead resting against hers. Tell me to stop and I will. But I need you to know that I've been waiting for you my entire life, and having you here, having you in my arms, is taking every ounce of control I have. Seraphine's answer came without hesitation. Don't stop. Caliph kissed her then, and it wasn't gentle. It was desperate and hungry and full of 18 years of longing. His hands tangled in her hair, pulling her closer, and she responded in kind, her fingers fumbling with the buckles of his leather armor. He lifted her easily, setting her on the edge of the table, and maps and documents scattered to the floor. Neither of them cared. His lips moved from her mouth to her neck, and she gasped, her head falling back. The bond between them blazed brighter, feeding off their connection, amplifying every touch and every sensation. She could feel his emotions as clearly as her own. His relief. His joy. His overwhelming need to claim her, to make sure she knew she was his and he was hers. Mine. The word was a growl against her neck, possessive and fierce. Yours. She gasped the word back, her hands pulling him closer, refusing to let even an inch of space exist between them. The world narrowed to just the two of them. The fire. The bond. The feeling of finally being whole. Later, they lay tangled together in furs by the fireplace, the room warm and quiet except for the crackling flames. Seraphine's head rested on Calitha's chest, and she could hear the steady rhythm of his heartbeat beneath her ear. Her fingers traced idle patterns across his skin, and she paused when she found a raised scar on his collarbone. Where did you get this? Her voice was soft, drowsy with contentment. Calitha's hand came up to cover hers, pressing her palm flat against the scar. The night of the coup. My uncle's blade. He tried to kill me when I refused to stop searching for you. That was the night I lost you. Seraphine shifted, propping herself up on one elbow so she could look at him. You didn't lose me. You found me. Calitha's eyes softened, and he reached up to tuck a strand of hair behind her ear. And I'm never letting go. Not for anything. Not for anyone. Seraphine leaned down and kissed him, slow and sweet this time, a promise instead of a demand. Then stay. Just like this. For as long as we can. Caliph pulled her back down against his chest, his arms wrapping around her like he could shield her from the entire world. Always. I'll stay always. And for the first time in 18 years, Seraphine fell asleep feeling safe. Feeling wanted. Feeling like she'd finally come home. 2 days before the coronation, word had already spread across the kingdoms. The Alpha King had found his mate after 18 years of searching. A blood-fire-marked wolf was about to become queen. The news traveled fast, carried by traders and messengers and wolves who couldn't keep such gossip to themselves. Some called it romantic. Others called it scandalous. But everyone was talking about it. Seraphine was in the library when Lyric found her, the captain of the guard's expression tight with barely concealed annoyance. "Your Grace, there's a wolf at the gates demanding an audience with the king. He claims he's your intended mate and that you were stolen from him." Seraphine's stomach dropped. She knew exactly who it was before Lyric even said the name. Corvin Frostbane. "He says he won't leave until he speaks to you." Seraphine stood slowly, her hands trembling slightly before she forced them to still. "Where is Caliph?" "Already in the throne room. He's granted the audience." Lyric's eyes were sharp, assessing. "Do you want me to throw this wolf out before he gets the chance to speak?" Seraphine considered it. Part of her wanted to say yes. Wanted to avoid seeing Corvin's face ever again. But another part of her, a part that was growing stronger every day, wanted to face him. Wanted him to see exactly what he'd walked away from. "No. I'll attend the audience." Lyric's expression shifted into something that might have been approval. She nodded once. "Then let's go make him regret showing his face here." By the time Seraphine entered the throne room, Corvin was already there, standing in the center of the hall looking far too confident for someone who had no right to be there. He wore fine clothing, clearly dressed to impress, and his posture screamed entitlement. Like he truly believed he had some claim to her. Caliph sat on the throne, his expression cold and unreadable. His eyes tracked Seraphine as she entered from the side door, and she saw the silent question there. "Are you all right? Do you want me to end this now?" She gave him a small nod. "I can handle this." Corvin turned when he heard her footsteps, and his mouth opened to speak. Then he stopped. Stared. His cocky expression faltered. Seraphine was dressed in royal attire, a gown of deep crimson that made her scars stand out like silver fire. Her hair was styled in a way that left them fully visible, and she wore a circlet of silver across her brow. She looked every inch the queen she was about to become. Powerful. Regal. Untouchable. She was nothing like the broken, crying wolf he'd abandoned in that restaurant. Corvin recovered quickly, pasting on a charming smile that made Seraphine's skin crawl. "Your Majesty, I've come to speak about Seraphine. There's been a misunderstanding. She was my intended mate, and I believe she was taken before we had a chance to properly." Seraphine's voice cut through his words like a blade, cold and queenly in a way that surprised even her. "You rejected me, Corvin. You called me cursed. You called me damaged goods. In front of an entire restaurant full of witnesses." Corvin's smile wavered. He glanced at Caliph, then back to her, clearly trying to figure out how to salvage this. "I didn't know who you were. If I'd known you were royalty, if I'd known you were the Alpha King's mate, I never would have." "So you'd only want me if I had a title?" Seraphine took a step closer, her voice steady and sharp. "If I could give you status? If I could make you look important?" Corvin opened his mouth, then closed it again. His face flushed. "That's not what I meant. I just didn't understand the situation. I made a mistake." Seraphine felt Caliph's presence before she saw him move. He rose from the throne and crossed the room to stand behind her, his hand settling on her shoulder in a gesture that was both protective and possessive. His eyes had gone full gold, his wolf barely contained beneath the surface. "You had your chance." Caliph's voice was a low growl that sent a shiver through the entire room. "You looked at her, saw her scars, and decided she wasn't worth your time. You humiliated her in public. You walked away like she was nothing." Corvin took a step back, finally realizing the danger he was in. "Your Majesty, I apologize. I didn't mean to cause offense. I was simply trying to. She's mine now." Calitha's words were absolute, leaving no room for argument. "My mate. My queen. Chosen by the moon goddess and claimed by me in front of witnesses. And if you ever speak to her again, if you ever even look at her again, I will rip your throat out and leave your corpse for the crows. Do you understand me?" Corvin had gone pale. He nodded quickly, his earlier confidence completely shattered. "Yes, Your Majesty. I understand." I apologize. Seraphine looked at him, this wolf who had made her feel worthless and invisible, and felt absolutely nothing. No anger. No hurt. Just a cold, distant satisfaction at seeing him squirm. You're dismissed, Corvin. Her voice was calm, final. Leave the Iron Veil territory and don't come back. Corvin bowed hastily, his movements jerky and graceless. Of course, Your Grace. My apologies. Guards appeared at his sides, escorting him toward the exit. The court, which had been watching the entire exchange with rapt attention, remained silent until the doors closed behind him. Then the whispers started. Excited. Approving. The queen had faced down the wolf who rejected her and sent him away with his tail between his legs. When the throne room had cleared, Caliph turned Seraphine to face him, his hands gentle on her arms. How do you feel? Seraphine took a breath, considering the question. She'd expected to feel angry or hurt or vindicated. But what she actually felt was something simpler and stronger. Powerful. A small smile tugged at her lips. I feel powerful. Calitha's expression softened, pride shining clear in his eyes. Good. Because you are. He pulled her into his arms, and she leaned into him, letting herself take comfort in his presence. 2 days ago, Corvin had made her feel like she was nothing. Like her scars made her unworthy of love or respect or basic human decency. But standing here now, wrapped in the arms of an alpha king who had searched for her for 18 years, about to be crowned queen of the most powerful kingdom in the north, she realized something important. Corvin hadn't rejected her. He'd rejected a chance to be part of something extraordinary. And that was his loss, not hers. Seraphine pulled back slightly and looked up at Caliph. Thank you for letting me handle that. Caliph smiled and pressed a kiss to her forehead. You didn't need me to handle it. You did that perfectly on your own. That's what a queen does. Seraphine felt warmth spread through her chest. Maybe she was finally starting to believe it. That she could be a queen. That she could be powerful. That she could stand beside Caliph and actually deserve to be there. The coronation was 2 days away. And for the first time since this all began, she wasn't afraid of it. She was ready. Coronation Day arrived with clear skies and a crispness in the air that felt like the world itself was holding its breath. The grand hall of the Iron Veil Castle had been transformed overnight. Banners hung from the vaulted ceilings, deep blue and silver, the colors of the kingdom. Torches lined the walls, their flames casting dancing light across the stone. And wolves filled every available space, packed shoulder to shoulder, representatives from every kingdom in the north and beyond. They'd come to witness history. The coronation of a queen who had been hidden for 18 years. A bloodfire-marked wolf ascending to the throne. Seraphine stood in the preparation chamber, staring at her reflection in the mirror. The gown they'd made for her was breathtaking. Silver silk that caught the light and seemed to glow, fitted perfectly to her frame and flowing out behind her in a long train. But what made it truly remarkable was the way it had been designed to highlight, not hide, her scars. The neckline was cut to leave her neck and shoulder exposed, and her hair had been styled up and away from her face so that the silver-red marks running from her temple down were fully visible. A statement. She was not ashamed. She would not hide. This was who she was, and she was claiming it. Lyric entered the room, dressed in formal guard attire, and stopped when she saw her. You look like a warrior queen. Her voice held unmistakable respect. Are you ready? Seraphine took a slow breath. She'd been asking herself that question all morning. Was she ready to walk down that aisle in front of hundreds of wolves who would be watching her every move? Was she ready to wear a crown and be responsible for an entire kingdom? Was she ready to stand beside Caliph as his equal? But then she remembered the girl who had sat alone in that restaurant just days ago, crying and convinced she was worthless. And she thought about how far she'd come since then. How much she'd discovered about herself. How strong her wolf was. How powerful the mate bond made her feel. How Caliph looked at her like she was everything. Yes, I'm ready. Lyric nodded and opened the door. Then let's go make you a queen. The walk to the grand hall felt both endless and far too short. Seraphine could hear the noise from inside, The murmur of hundreds of voices, the anticipation hanging thick in the air. The massive doors stood before her, and beyond them was everything. Her future. Her destiny. The life she'd never imagined she could have. The doors opened. The hall fell silent. Every head turned to look at her. Seraphine stepped forward, and the aisle stretched out before her like a path carved through a sea of wolves. She could feel their eyes on her, taking in the gown, the scars, the way she held her head high despite the fear trying to claw its way up her throat. She forced herself to breathe evenly, to walk with purpose and grace, to remember that she belonged here. At the end of the aisle, Caliph stood waiting. He wore formal armor, polished to a mirror shine, and a crown of dark metal that marked him unmistakably as the Alpha King. But his eyes were only on her, filled with pride and love and something that looked a lot like awe. Beside him stood Elder Morvain, an ancient seer who had served the Iron Veil Kingdom for longer than most wolves had been alive. Her eyes were clouded with age, but her presence radiated power and wisdom. She would perform the ceremony, as she had performed the coronation of every king and queen before them. Seraphine reached the dais and climbed the steps, her heart pounding so hard she was certain everyone in the hall could hear it. She stopped in front of Elder Morvain, and the elder reached out to take both of her hands. Morvain's voice was strong despite her age, carrying through the grand hall with clarity. Do you, Seraphine Ashenmore, accept the responsibility of ruling the Iron Veil Kingdom? Do you accept the weight of leadership, the burden of decision, and the duty to protect those who cannot protect themselves? Seraphine's voice didn't waver. I do. Do you vow to protect this kingdom, its wolves, and its future? Do you vow to stand against those who would bring harm, to fight for justice, and to rule with wisdom and compassion? I do. Morvain released her hands and turned to lift the crown from its cushion. It was beautiful, crafted from silver and set with moonstones that glowed with an inner light. The craftsmanship was exquisite, delicate, and strong all at once, much like the wolf it was made for. The elder held the crown above Seraphine's head, and her voice rang out like a proclamation that would echo through history. Then by the power vested in me by the moon goddess herself, and witnessed by the wolves of every kingdom, I crown you Queen Seraphine of the Iron Veil. Bloodfire marked. Goddess chosen. Protector of the North. Rise and take your place. The crown settled onto Seraphine's head, cool metal against her skin, surprisingly light despite its weight in meaning. She straightened, feeling something shift inside her. Not just acceptance. Not just duty. Power. Real, undeniable power that thrummed through her veins and connected her to every wolf in the kingdom. The hall erupted. Howls of approval rose from hundreds of throats, a sound so loud and primal it shook the walls. Wolves stamped their feet and raised their fists and called her name. Queen Seraphine. Queen Seraphine. The noise was overwhelming, joyful, a celebration that felt like the kingdom itself was welcoming her home. Caliph stepped forward and took her hand, his grip warm and steady and grounding. They turned to face the hall together, king and queen, standing side by side as equals. His thumb brushed across her knuckles, and when he leaned close, his voice was meant only for her even though his eyes were on their people. Look at you, my queen. Seraphine turned her head slightly, meeting his gaze, and smiled. Our queen. The correction made his eyes flash gold, and his grip tightened on her hand. You're right. Ours. He raised their joined hands above their heads, and the hall roared louder. This is your kingdom now, Seraphine. These are your people. And they already love you. Seraphine looked out at the sea of faces, at the wolves bowing and howling and celebrating. She saw nobles and warriors, servants and common wolves, all of them united in this moment. All of them accepting her. All of them seeing her not as cursed or broken, but as their queen. She thought about the journey that had brought her here. The fire that had scarred her. The 18 years of loneliness and invisibility. The blind date that had humiliated her. The moment Caliph had walked through that door and changed everything. Every painful step had led her to this moment. Every scar had been worth it. Because standing here now, wearing a crown and holding the hand of her mate, surrounded by wolves who had accepted her as their queen, Seraphine finally understood something she'd never believed before. She wasn't cursed. She wasn't broken. She wasn't invisible. She was exactly where she was always meant to be. Caliph leaned down and kissed her, right there in front of everyone, and the hall exploded with approval. When he pulled back, his forehead rested against hers. "Welcome home, my queen." Seraphine's eyes stung with tears, but they were good tears. Happy tears. "I'm home." And for the first time in her entire life, she truly was. The day after her coronation, Seraphine made a decision that surprised everyone. She wanted to go to the dungeons. She wanted to confront Thorn, the uncle who had tried to kill her 18 years ago, who had burned her with enchanted wolfsbane fire and left her for dead. The man who had stolen her childhood and tried to destroy her future before it ever began. Caliph tried to stop her. They were in the war room when she brought it up, and his expression immediately shifted to concern. "You don't have to face him. He's been locked away for years. He can't hurt you anymore." Seraphine looked at him, her voice calm but determined. "Yes, I do." "He tried to erase me. He wanted me dead so badly that he was willing to burn a 5-year-old child alive. I need him to see that he failed. I need him to know that I'm still here, and I'm everything he feared I would be." Caliph studied her for a long moment, then nodded slowly. "If you're sure. But I'm coming with you. I wouldn't have it any other way." The dungeons beneath the Iron Veil Castle were cold and dark, carved deep into the mountain itself. Torches lined the walls, casting flickering shadows across the damp stone. The air smelled of mold and despair, and Seraphine could hear water dripping somewhere in the distance. Guards stood at attention as they descended, bowing their heads respectfully as the king and queen passed. Thorn's cell was at the very end of the corridor, isolated from the other prisoners. 2 guards stood outside, and they unlocked the heavy iron door without a word. Caliph entered first, his presence filling the small space, and Seraphine followed. Thorn sat chained to the wall, his wrists bound in iron that had been enchanted to suppress his wolf. He looked older than Seraphine had expected, his hair gray and his face lined with years of bitterness. But his eyes were still sharp and filled with venom. He looked up when they entered, his gaze landing first on Caliph with hatred, then shifting to Seraphine. He went completely pale. His mouth opened, then closed. His eyes widened in shock and something that might have been fear. "Impossible." His voice was a rasp, disbelieving. "You died. I watched you burn. I saw the fire consume you." Seraphine stepped forward, her chin high, the crown still on her head catching the torchlight. "I survived. Your curse didn't kill me. It made me stronger." Thorn's expression twisted, shock giving way to rage. "You shouldn't exist. You were supposed to die. Everything was supposed to fall into place. The throne was supposed to be mine." Seraphine felt Calitha's presence behind her, solid and reassuring, but she didn't need him to speak for her. "Not this time. You tried to destroy me because you were afraid. Afraid of what the mate bond would mean. Afraid that Caliph would be too strong to control if I lived. Afraid that your plans would crumble. And you were right to be afraid, because here I stand." Thorn spat on the ground, his voice dripping with contempt. "You think you've won? You're a weak little girl playing dress-up in a crown that doesn't belong to you. The court will tire of you. They'll see what I saw, a cursed, broken thing that has no business ruling." Seraphine stepped closer and power radiated from her, the kind that came from the mate bond and the moon goddess's blessing and 18 years of surviving what should have killed her. "I'm the queen you tried to destroy. And I'm still here while you rot in chains." The court bowed to me. Every kingdom sent representatives to my coronation. Wolves who didn't even know my name a week ago now call me their queen. And you? You're nothing. A failed traitor rotting in the dark. Thorn's face flushed with anger. The court will never truly accept you. You're cursed. Those scars mark you as touched by dark magic. They'll turn on you eventually. Calitha's voice cut through the cell like a blade, cold and absolute. The court bowed to her yesterday. Every wolf in the Grand Hall howled her name. Every kingdom that matters recognized her as queen. She's everything you're not. Honorable. Strong. chosen by the goddess herself. And while she rules above with grace and power, you'll spend every remaining day of your miserable life down here in the dark, knowing that you failed. Seraphine looked down at Thorn, this pathetic, bitter man who had haunted her nightmares for so long without her even knowing his name. She'd expected to feel anger when she faced him, rage at what he'd stolen from her, hatred for the pain he'd caused. But standing here now, looking at him chained and powerless, she felt something else entirely. Pity. He was nothing. A sad, desperate wolf who had gambled everything on a plot that had failed spectacularly. He'd lost his freedom, his power, his future. And she had gained all of it. I didn't come here for your approval, Thorn. Her voice was steady, queenly, final. I came to show you that you failed. I lived. I found my mate. I claimed my throne. And you'll spend the rest of your life knowing that every single thing you tried to destroy not only survived but thrived. She turned and walked toward the door, done with him. Done giving him any more of her time or energy. Thorn's voice rose behind her, desperate and furious. You're nothing. You'll never be a true queen. Those scars will always mark you as cursed. Seraphine paused at the doorway and looked back over her shoulder. These scars mark me as a survivor. As someone strong enough to endure what would have killed anyone else. They're not a curse, Thorn. They're a crown I've worn my entire life. And now I have a second one to match. She walked out, and Caliph followed, the door slamming shut behind them with a heavy finality. Thorn's screams echoed through the dungeon, incoherent and impotent, but Seraphine didn't look back. She didn't need to. He was her past, and she was done letting him have any power over her future. They climbed the stairs back up to the main castle in silence. When they reached the top, away from the cold and the dark, Caliph turned to her. How do you feel? Seraphine considered the question. She'd thought confronting Thorn would bring closure, or satisfaction, or some grand emotional release. But what she actually felt was simpler than that. Free. I feel free. Caliph smiled and pulled her into his arms, pressing a kiss to the top of her head. Good. Because he doesn't deserve any more of your time or thoughts. You have a kingdom to rule now. A future to build. And I want to build it with you. Seraphine leaned into him, letting herself take comfort in his warmth and his strength. She'd gone down to those dungeons as a woman seeking answers, seeking confrontation, seeking proof that she was stronger than her past. And she'd walked back out knowing the truth. She didn't need Thorn's approval or his acknowledgement or his regret. She didn't need him to see her as anything other than what she was. Because she already knew. She was a queen. She was powerful. She was loved. And she was exactly where she belonged. That's how you face your demons. What should happen to Thorn? Comment your ideas. That night, the castle was quiet. The coronation celebrations had finally ended, and most of the visiting wolves had either retired to their guest chambers or departed for their home territories. Seraphine and Caliph returned to the royal chambers exhausted but content, the weight of the day finally catching up to them. Seraphine removed her crown and set it carefully on its stand, still not quite used to the sight of it. Caliph was removing his formal armor piece by piece, and they were talking quietly about the day, about the ceremony, about how surreal it all still felt. Neither of them heard the assassins until it was too late. The window exploded inward in a shower of glass and splintered wood. 5 wolves in black masks burst through, moving with the practiced efficiency of trained killers. Seraphine barely had time to gasp before Caliph was moving, his body already shifting mid-leap. His massive black wolf form crashed into the first 2 assassins before they'd fully cleared the window, taking them down with brutal force. Seraphine stumbled backward, her heart hammering in her chest. 3 assassins remained, and one of them was advancing on her, a silver blade gleaming in his hand. The cursed queen dies tonight. His voice was cold, matter-of-fact, like he was stating something inevitable. Fear shot through Seraphine, sharp and paralyzing. She'd trained, yes, but only for a few days. She wasn't a warrior. She wasn't ready for this. Her eyes darted to Caliph, who was locked in combat with 2 wolves, his jaws snapping and claws tearing. He couldn't reach her. She was on her own. The assassin lunged. Something inside Seraphine snapped. It wasn't fear anymore. It was fury. White-hot and absolute. How dare they? How dare they come into her home, threaten her mate, try to finish what Thorn had started 18 years ago. She'd survived a fire that should have killed her. She'd endured 18 years of loneliness and shame. She'd claimed a throne and a crown and a future. And she was not going to let these cowards take it from her. Her wolf surged forward with a roar that echoed through the bond, and Seraphine let her take control. The shift happened faster than it ever had before, her body rearranging itself in a heartbeat. When she landed on 4 paws, she was no longer the woman who'd been afraid. She was a predator. Her white wolf was massive, even larger than she'd been during training, as if the rage and the need to protect had unlocked something deeper inside her. Her scars blazed silver, glowing so bright they lit up the darkened chamber like starlight. The assassin hesitated, clearly not expecting this. Not expecting the cursed queen to fight back. Seraphine didn't give him time to recover. She launched herself at him with savage grace, her jaws closing around his arm before he could bring the blade down. She heard bone crack and his scream of pain, and she threw him aside like he weighed nothing. He hit the wall hard and didn't get back up. The other 2 assassins turned their attention to her, abandoning their attempt to flank Caliph. They moved in tandem, coordinated and deadly. But Seraphine's wolf was faster. She ducked under the first attack, her claws raking across the second assassin's side and opening deep gashes. He howled and staggered back, and she spun to face the other one. Caliph was suddenly beside her, his black wolf massive and terrifying, blood dripping from his muzzle. They moved together without needing to speak, the bond linking them so completely that they fought as one. He went left, she went right. He struck high, she struck low. Black and white wolves working in perfect, deadly sync. The remaining assassins didn't stand a chance. Within minutes, 3 were dead, 1 was unconscious and bleeding out against the wall, and the 5th had thrown himself back through the broken window and fled into the night. Seraphine's wolf wanted to chase him, to hunt him down and finish what they'd started, but Calitha's presence beside her was calming, grounding. The immediate threat was over. They shifted back to human form, both breathing hard, their skin slick with sweat and blood. Seraphine looked down at herself, at the blood covering her hands and arms, and the reality of what had just happened hit her like a physical blow. Her legs went weak, and she swayed. Caliph was there instantly, his hands on her arms, steadying her. "Are you hurt?" His voice was urgent, his eyes scanning her body for injuries. "Tell me where you're hurt." Seraphine shook her head, her voice coming out shaky. "No, I'm okay. I'm not hurt. The blood isn't mine." Caliph pulled her against his chest, and she felt him shaking too, the adrenaline still coursing through both of them. "You were incredible." His voice was rough with emotion. "Did you see yourself? You were magnificent." Seraphine's hands were trembling as she pulled back to look at him. "I killed them." The words came out small, uncertain. "I've never killed anyone before." Caliph cupped her face in his hands, forcing her to meet his eyes. "You protected yourself. You protected your mate. You protected your kingdom. That's what queens do, Seraphine. That's what warriors do. You did nothing wrong." Seraphine's breath hitched, and tears stung her eyes. She'd spent her whole life being told she was weak, cursed, helpless. And tonight she'd proven that every single one of those words was a lie. She'd fought. She'd survived. She'd won. Caliph pulled her close again, his arms wrapping around her like he could shield her from the entire world. "You're not the invisible girl anymore. You're a warrior. A queen. And you're mine. No one will ever take you from me. I won't let them." Seraphine buried her face in his chest and let herself shake, let herself feel the fear and the fury and the overwhelming relief that they were both alive. The bond between them pulsed warm and strong, reassuring her that he was here, that he was safe, that they'd survived this together. Guards burst through the door moments later, weapons drawn, eyes wide as they took in the scene. The broken window. The bodies. The blood. their king and queen standing in the center of it all, covered in evidence of the fight. Lyric pushed through the guards, her expression thunderous. "Your Majesties, are you injured?" Caliph shook his head, not releasing his hold on Seraphine. "We're fine." Thorne's loyalists. 5 assassins. 3 dead, 1 unconscious, 1 escaped through the window. "Send hunters after him. I want him found and brought back alive for questioning." Lyric nodded sharply and began barking orders. Guards flooded the room, securing the scene, removing the bodies, checking for additional threats. Servants appeared with blankets and water, offering them quietly and respectfully. Caliph finally released Seraphine long enough to accept a blanket, which he wrapped around her shoulders. His hand found hers and squeezed. "We need to move to different chambers for tonight. This room needs to be secured and repaired." Seraphine nodded numbly, letting him lead her out of the destroyed chamber and down the hall to a guest suite. Once inside, away from the chaos and the guards and the evidence of what had just happened, she finally let herself collapse onto the edge of the bed. Caliph knelt in front of her, his hands resting on her knees. "Talk to me. What are you feeling?" Seraphine looked at him, this king who had changed her entire world, and tried to find the words. "I feel like I just became someone I don't recognize. I've never been violent. I've never fought back. And tonight I just killed 3 wolves without hesitation." Caliph's expression was gentle but firm. "You became who you were always meant to be. A protector. A leader. Someone strong enough to defend what's hers. That person was always inside you, Seraphine. Tonight, she just finally had a reason to come out." Seraphine took a shaky breath and nodded. She looked down at her hands, still stained with blood, and made a decision. She wasn't going to apologize for surviving. Wasn't going to feel guilty for protecting herself and her mate. She'd done what she had to do, and she'd do it again if she needed to. She looked back up at Caliph and saw nothing but pride and love in his eyes. "Okay, I'm okay." He leaned forward and kissed her forehead, soft and reverent. "You're more than okay. You're extraordinary." And sitting there, wrapped in a blanket and covered in the evidence of her first real fight, Seraphine finally believed him. 1 month had passed since the assassination attempt. 1 month since Seraphine had discovered the warrior inside herself. 1 month of ruling beside Caliph, learning the ins and outs of leadership, meeting with councils and settling disputes and making decisions that affected thousands of lives. It had been overwhelming and exhausting and absolutely incredible. She'd grown into her role as queen in ways she never thought possible, and the pack had embraced her completely. The whispers about her scars had turned into stories about her strength. The doubts about her worthiness had transformed into respect and loyalty. But tonight wasn't about ruling. Tonight was about something far more ancient and sacred. Tonight was the full moon, and under its light, they would complete the binding ceremony. The mate bond was already strong between them. Seraphine could feel Caliph constantly now, a warm presence in the back of her mind that brought comfort and connection. But the binding ceremony would take that bond and make it permanent. Unbreakable. Their souls would be tied together for eternity, woven so tightly that nothing, not even death, could fully sever the connection. The entire pack had gathered in the clearing outside the castle walls, hundreds of wolves forming a massive circle around the ceremonial space. Torches burned at the cardinal points, their flames dancing in the night breeze. The full moon hung heavy and silver overhead, so bright it cast everything in shades of blue and white. The air hummed with anticipation and ancient magic, the kind that predated kingdoms and crowns and politics. This was primal. This was what it meant to be wolf. Seraphine stood at the edge of the circle, dressed in a simple white gown that left her arms bare. Her scars glowed faintly in the moonlight, silver against her skin. Caliph stood across from her, bare-chested and powerful, his eyes already beginning to shift gold with the proximity of his wolf. Between them stood Elder Morvain, holding a ceremonial blade that looked older than the mountains themselves. The elder raised her hands, and the pack fell silent. Not even the wind dared make a sound. "We gather under the full moon to witness the binding ceremony." Morvaine's voice carried through the clearing, strong despite her age. This is no simple mating. This is the joining of two souls, two wolves, two destinies. Once bound, they cannot be separated. Once joined, they are eternal. The moon goddess herself will witness this union and bless it with her light. Seraphine felt her heart racing. She'd known this night was coming, had prepared for it, had wanted it. But standing here now with the weight of the pack's attention and the power of the full moon pressing down on her, she felt the enormity of what they were about to do. Kalitha's eyes found hers across the circle, and the bond between them pulsed with warmth and reassurance. She wasn't doing this alone. They were doing this together. Morvaine gestured for them to step forward, and they moved into the center of the circle. Kalith took her hands, his grip steady and grounding. The elder lifted the ceremonial blade and held it between them, moonlight glinting off the ancient metal. By moonlight and blood, by soul and spirit, do you bind yourselves for eternity? Morvaine's voice took on a ritualistic quality, the words spoken in the old tongue first before being translated. Do you vow to share joy and pain, strength and weakness, life and death, until the stars themselves go dark? Kalitha's voice was steady and absolute. I do. Seraphine took a breath, feeling the weight of the vow settling over her like a cloak. This was forever. This was everything. And she wanted it more than she'd ever wanted anything in her life. I do. Morvaine handed the blade to Kalith first. He took Seraphine's wrist gently, his touch reverent, and drew the blade across her skin. Not deep, but enough to draw blood. Seraphine didn't flinch. She watched the crimson well up, dark against her pale skin, and felt the significance of the moment settling into her bones. Then Kalith handed her the blade. Seraphine took his wrist, her hands steady despite the pounding of her heart, and made the same cut. His blood flowed, and he didn't react beyond a slight tightening of his jaw. Morvaine took both their wrists and pressed them together, blood mingling, skin against skin. Now speak the words. Bind your souls as your blood is bound. Kalitha's eyes locked onto Seraphine's, gold meeting silver. My soul to yours. My strength to yours. My life to yours. For eternity. Seraphine felt tears prick her eyes as she spoke the same words, her voice shaking with emotion. My soul to yours. My strength to yours. My life to yours. For eternity. The moment the last word left her lips, power exploded. It erupted from where their wrists were joined, a blinding surge of silver and gold light that shot upward into the sky like a pillar connecting earth to moon. Seraphine gasped as the bond between them expanded, deepened, transformed into something so profound she could barely comprehend it. She could feel Kalith everywhere. In her mind, in her heart, in her very soul. His emotions were hers. His thoughts brushed against hers. His wolf reached out and twined with hers, black and white merging into something complete. Their wolves howled in unison, the sound tearing from their throats without conscious thought. And the entire pack responded, hundreds of voices rising in a chorus that shook the forest and echoed off the mountains. The sound was primal and beautiful and overwhelming, a celebration of the bond that had just been forged. The light grew brighter, so bright Seraphine had to close her eyes against it. She felt the magic of the ceremony settling into her skin, marking her, changing her on a fundamental level. When the light finally faded and she could open her eyes again, she looked down at her wrist. A mark had appeared where Kalitha's blood had touched her skin. Intricate and beautiful, two wolves intertwined in an eternal dance. One black, one white. Their forms woven together so completely it was impossible to tell where one ended and the other began. Kalith held up his own wrist, and the same mark was there, perfect and identical. Permanent proof of what they'd just become. Morvaine's voice rang out once more, filled with satisfaction. The bond is complete. The souls are joined. What the moon goddess has bound, no force in this world or any other can break. Rise, Alpha King Kalith and Queen Seraphine. Rise as one. The pack erupted in celebration, howls and cheers filling the night air. But Seraphine barely heard them. All she could focus on was Kalith, on the bond between them that now felt as essential as breathing, on the way he was looking at her like she was his entire world. He pulled her into his arms and kissed her, deep and claiming and full of promise. When he pulled back, his forehead rested against hers. "How do you feel?" Seraphine smiled through her tears. "Complete. For the first time in my life, I feel complete." Kalitha's arms tightened around her. "You are. We both are. And nothing will ever separate us again." The pack continued to celebrate around them, but in that moment, it was just the two of them. Two souls that had been searching for each other for 18 years. Two wolves that had finally found their way home. Two hearts beating in perfect sync under the light of the full moon. The binding ceremony was complete, and Seraphine knew, with absolute certainty, that this was only the beginning of their story. 6 months later, Seraphine made a request that surprised even Caliph. She wanted to return to the Borderlands Tavern. The place where everything had changed. The place where she'd sat alone and humiliated, convinced she was unworthy of love. The place where an Alpha King had walked through the door and rewritten her entire future. When they arrived, the staff recognized them immediately. The manager rushed forward, bowing deeply, stumbling over his words about what an honor it was to have the king and queen in their establishment. But Seraphine stopped him with a gentle smile and a simple request. "Just a table by the window, please." She walked through the restaurant, passing wolves who had been there that night 6 months ago. Some of them recognized her. She could see it in their eyes, the moment they realized she was the scarred wolf who had sat crying while her date walked out. The wolf they had whispered about and pitied. Except now she wore a crown. Now she carried herself with the confidence of someone who knew exactly who she was and what she was worth. Now her scars glowed with pride instead of shame. She sat at the same table where Corvin had rejected her. The same spot where she'd wanted to disappear. Caliph joined her, sliding into the seat across from her before changing his mind and moving to sit beside her instead. He leaned over and kissed her temple, right where one of her scars began. "Why did you want to come back here?" Seraphine looked around the restaurant, taking in the familiar space that held such painful and powerful memories. "Because this is where my life changed. Where I stopped being invisible. Where I started becoming who I was always meant to be." The other diners were watching them now, but not with pity or disgust. With respect. With reverence. Several stood and bowed, acknowledging their queen. Seraphine nodded to them graciously, still getting used to the way people looked at her now. "I used to think these scars made me cursed." Her fingers traced the silver-red marks on her neck, the same marks Corvin had recoiled from. "Made me unlovable. Made me something to be ashamed of." Caliph took her hand, pressing a kiss to her knuckles. "And now?" Seraphine smiled, and it was genuine and full of joy. "Now I know they led me home. To you. To my kingdom. To myself. They were never a curse. They were a map. A guide. Proof that I was strong enough to survive what should have destroyed me." Kalitha's eyes warmed, filled with the kind of love that still took her breath away. The Bloodfire Queen. Seraphine leaned into him, her voice soft but certain. "Your queen." He kissed her then, slow and claiming, and the restaurant erupted in respectful applause. Not mockery. Not judgment. Celebration. Seraphine Ashenmore walked into that restaurant 6 months ago invisible, broken, and alone. She walked out a queen, claimed by the Alpha King, crowned by destiny, and marked by the moon goddess herself. Her scars weren't a curse. They were a prophecy. A promise that she would survive, that she would rise, that she would become exactly who she was meant to be. And Corvin? The man who rejected her? The wolf who called her damaged goods and walked away without a second glance? He's still unmated, still alone, watching from the sidelines as the woman he dismissed rules an entire kingdom. He had his chance. He chose to walk away. And Seraphine? She chose to walk forward. Into power. Into love. Into a destiny that was hers from the moment she drew her first breath. The invisible girl became a queen. The cursed wolf became a legend. And the scars that everyone said made her worthless became the very thing that led her home. Did you love this story? Subscribe and turn on notifications so you never miss a video. Thank you for being part of this pack. Until next time, may the moon light your path.